It seems that we are good to go. So let's start. For those of you that don't know me, I am Anat Ben Simon. I am the president of the organization for the past almost 2 years. This is a very important moment for us. We have been working on it for quite a while. So there are people from all over the world. So I'll start with the greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you are. And thank you so much for joining us in this very unusual annual meeting. It's the first time that we are doing annual meeting. And so we might have some issues, but I do hope that it will go very smoothly. I think it's safe to assume that it would have been far more pleasant to meet in person, as we are accustomed to do, but unfortunately, it's not possible due to this ongoing pandemic. Let's hope that we'll be able to meet each other in person next year in Mexico. I know that the Mexican members are working very hard on preparing a conference, and they are very optimistic about it. I'm sure that it has been a very challenging year for all of us on the personal and professional level. However, I do hope that you and your loved ones are keeping healthy, that you have managed to keep your jobs, which is not simple in these days, to carry out your projects, to keep your daily routine as much as possible, to keep your sanity and your high morale. Very challenging things to do, but let's be optimistic about it. We have a very busy agenda planned for today, and it's rather late in the day for some of us. Therefore, I'll keep this introduction as short as possible. Before we start, I want to thank my colleagues at the Board of Trustees who worked very hard throughout the whole year to keep the association alive and relevant. And I wish to express my deepest gratitude to the members of the Conference Planning Committee, Dennis Opus, Navid Yusuf, and Emmanuel Sibanta. Guys, you did a great job. We have 2 sessions planned for today. A keynote followed by 10 minutes break, and then a panel session. The annual assembly general meeting will take place tomorrow, and we'll appreciate very much the participation of at least 1 delegate from each member organization. It's a very important meeting. We have to make some decisions, so please join us. Finally, I want to introduce Navid Yusuf from Aga Khan University Examination Board, who will be moderating both sessions. So without further ado, let's start the first session of the day. Okay, I need to change my slides. Okay. So, session 1. It is my utmost pleasure to present our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Rukhsana Zuberi, Emerita Professor from Aga Khan University. The title of her talk is Excellence in Assessment, a play in 2 parts. Some biographical notes about Professor Rukhsana Zuberi. Professor Zuberi is Professor Emerita at Aga Khan University from or at Aga Khan University in Pakistan. At Aga Khan University, Professor Zuberi led the curricular changes to competency-based integrated curriculum and assessment program, which received the Aspire to Excellence Award in Student Assessment and in Student Engagement from the Association of Medical Education in Europe. As Associate Dean, she initiated a centralized question bank, state-of-the-art simulation lab, and a master's in health professions education, where she directed the advanced level courses on assessment. Professor Zuberi chaired the Higher Education National MBBS curriculum revision, and was member of curriculum committee of the Pakistan Medical and Dental Council. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award in medical education. I am deeply impressed. I hope you are too. Currently, she serves as Director of National Residence Program, South College of Physicians and Surgeons, Pakistan. She's member of Executive Committee, Association of Medical Education, Eastern Mediterranean Region, member Aspire Academy, Aspire Assessment Panel, and Aspire Board. I hope, Professor Zuberi, that you have some time to breathe in between all your positions and responsibilities. So without further ado, the floor, or rather the screen, is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Anat Ben-Simon, for this wonderful, too kind introduction. What I'd like to do is that maybe I can start the presentation immediately. And I would just, as I go, to say that, especially to Dr. Anat Ben-Simon, the President of the International Association for Educational Assessment, the Board of Trustees, conference organizers, Dennis Opus, ladies and gentlemen, good day. You are in different places, so as Dr. Ben-Simon said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope not good night. So I just want to ask you, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. So I have great privilege, and I feel very honored to be asked to speak at the International Association for Education Assessment. And I wish all the organizers a wonderful conference and very fruitful conclusions. I bring to you greetings from Karachi, Pakistan, a city of big beaches and beautiful heritage buildings. I also bring to you greetings from the Aga Khan University, placed in 7 cities and 3 continents. My talk will be hopefully help you differentiate between fit for purpose and robust assessment, utilize both, especially in the COVID pandemic. Act 1, Scene 1. I thought I'll use the analogy of the diamond, as the host country is South Africa. Finding the diamond. Is the assessment fit for purpose? Fit for what purpose? Can it satisfy the institution society that our graduates or the product that exit from our schools are safe in their vocations or know what they're supposed to know at this stage in their lives? What is fit? That it measures what it is supposed to measure. It is also the degree that theory and evidence support the interpretation of the test scores that we use. What should we measure? The outcomes and the competencies. Does our assessment program assess all the outcomes? And does it do it appropriately? Is it fit for each of the purposes of the different competencies? We know why we assess, right? We assess to rank order students for admissions, to certify competence, to see if they can progress to the next level, which is summative assessment, or to graduate out of the schools. And if they're fit to get into college and the next level of a study. We also assess to help learning. Is a teaching tool, which is formative assessment. We can also assess to diagnose learning problems. Where is the problem for this student or these students? And then correct that. We also assess to assess ourselves and our academic programs. And sometimes in my field, we do it to recertify competence. But the most important thing to remember is that not only do we have to assess what the students know, that is assessment of learning, but we must also assess to help them become better. That is, assessment as a teaching learning strategy for learning. So what are the competencies, and outcomes? Over here, the competencies and outcomes will be used synonymously. Competence is what a graduate or an exec level student is able to do, which is the habitual and judicial use of communication, knowledge, skills, critical reasoning, values, and reflection, which are put into daily practice for individuals and the communities we serve. It's a habit of lifelong learning, and it differs from setting to setting, fluctuates with familiarity of what we see. It's something that we develop and we keep on developing the whole of our lives with deliberate practice, habit of mind, behavior, which makes some of us wise. As I said, the competencies will be used for outcomes and for all students in all academic programs at the school level, the graduate, the continuing education programs. If you look at it, the competencies are the same. We want them to be ethical, accountable, have integrity. They should be able to direct their own learning by the time they graduate out of school. They should be able to apply the knowledge we get them to achieve into solving problems, thinking critically about problems, to have good communication, effective communication skills, good technical skills, and be socially accountable for the people, our society. They should also have digital literacy to be able to make evidence-based decisions. And at different levels, there will be a researcher scholar, but at the school level, we must inculcate within them a spirit of inquiry and some initiative, if not leadership. And as you see, this can be for any program, undergraduate, school, undergraduate, postgraduate, or continuing education. Then you can match the blueprint to the competency and say, okay, where do we assess this? How do we assess this? Make the whole of it, and then we see. This is only as example. Of course, there's so many different ways to assess each one of these. But this is a very important validity evidence. So how, talking about validity, there are different ways of enhancing the validity of decisions, which we'll take one by one. Enhancing the validity of content validity, which is the blueprint. You define the expected level of outcomes at graduation, identify the tools for each, and work backwards for each of the years of the school. If you want the student to evaluate data and solve problems, it should go into the blueprint. The level of the questions, for example, in MCQs or short answer questions, you want to state within the blueprint how many should be recall and how many application based, and as they go higher up, maybe more and more application based and less of the recall. If there's any performance assessment which is required in your schools, you can have multi-station or continuous assessments, etc. Because performance assessment of professionalism, communication skills will have to be continuous rather than through written exams. And periodically, we must review the blueprint for obsolescence and relevance to decrease one and increase the other. Second validity evidence is the response process. We must have terms of reference for the question bank and for the assessment committee or the assessment board in our school. There should be a separate bank with a blueprint for all the tests or the examination or assessments, which should be aligned to the vision, the curriculum, and the teaching learning. So the assessment blueprint has to be a mirror image of the curriculum blueprint or the table of specifications. And the exam policies must be fair, transparent, and made public. Staff has to be qualified, and we'll talk more about it later. Faculty needs to be, or staff development needs to be undertaken for each tool, how to develop and how to rate. Sometimes the questions or the rating scales or items are present for each school. You don't have to develop them, but sometimes you do. If they're already there, you just validate them. Just make sure for one thing, which is very important. If you are planning to change any of the assessments, please pilot it first, use it formatively to learn and to give practice to the students and the faculty before making it a permanent change, and see what the results did. Did they help your decision, or did they make the decisions more difficult? The other considerations, you can see how your assessment fares against another gold standard. What is it aligned to, correlated with? What is it different from? For example, maths may have a divergent validity from English literature, but English language and English literature may have a convergent validity because both use the same language at least. There must be synchrony between those who run the curriculum and those who set assessments. There needs to be more of the frequent and less of the summative assessments. With feedback, a two-way street. You provide feedback and you get feedback from the students built into each. Just because it's a summative assessment doesn't mean we don't need feedback from the students and should not provide some to them. There needs to be increased opportunities for student remediation, handholding of the weaker ones, till they are strong. Assessment must also provide multiple longitudinal evidence of achievement of increasing complexity over time. This is also validity evidence. This helps in the longitudinal profiling of students where we can track the weaker ones and make sure that all students have achieved the outcomes. And lastly, the school's assessment systems, if they are followed by others and taken as an example par excellence, that's also validity evidence. The student results must all go back into feedback loops. From the results, we see where the students did well and where they did not do so well. So the feedback goes to the curriculum committee. Where they did well, applaud. Please congratulate them. And where they didn't, we can always improve. In the same way, we do not take enough time to applaud or congratulate or appreciate and acknowledge our teachers. We must applaud them if the students do well in their courses. And if they don't, then maybe they can see whether it's the curriculum or the teaching or the students which are at fault. The feedback must go to the students. And if they did well, congratulations. And well, they can always be asked to focus more in different areas, especially for the future or for the incoming class. We can make sure that this area is covered better for the next class. It should go to the exam setters. And if it was well conducted, we must applaud them. If not, then we have to review the examination blueprint. Is it good? If it is, then maybe if the questions were they good? If they were, then maybe the problem is elsewhere. And all of this needs to be told to the institutional leaders. So finding the diamond in the pandemic, all evidences of validity can be performed or gathered remotely or online. I will give you an example of the AKU exam board. Due to the decrease in the school days in the initial part of the pandemic last year, all the people, all teachers across the country were called on Zoom. And they did if you look at it, syllabus rationalization of 2021-22, in which they actually took away, decided together, came to a consensus and deleted the nice to know components and the longitudinal and vertical redundancies. so that the exams could still be held on the essential components. And the essential components could be included in the teaching learning. So, as I said, it's a mirror image. That was the validity evidence. Now we found the diamond making the cut, Act 1, Scene 2. And this analogy comes from actual diamond bruting, clawing, cleaving, bruting, polishing. And I'll walk you through this. The quality assurance for increasing the robustness of assessment. We must have standard operating procedures. Who will do what to whom, when, and how? Clearly written. So there's no room for error, or we minimize error. Policies for error-free exams, and put it there. Policies for the number of questions and cases will be used in the exams, in the written, and the practicals, whatever. And for the question bank to remain secure, healthy, and dynamic, we must have at least 5 to 10 times the question that goes in the exam or the assessments. For the quality, there needs to be an item review committee to look at the content, construct, and relevance. For all test formats, for the MCQs, short answers, and short essays, whatever. And they will be the people who will increase the number of items and delete obsolete or redo bad performance. Carrying on, improving the reliability. The staffing and their development has to be part of the policies of the question bank. They have to improve over time. If they will not, then their level of qualification will be minimize your efforts. It will be a roadblock. So in our case at the Aga Khan University, we went smoothly into online examinations. There needs to be policies for exam department, exam calendar, time of receiving questions, finalizing the exam paper, who will photocopy, conduct exams, invigilate, collect, who will assess the short answer questions, when will scores be available. Computers will do it actually. Who will compile, present, approve results? That's usually done by our exam cell. But you need to have all of this done. Who will approve the results? Who makes the final decisions? And where are the policies are in the public domain? Reach out. And then, of course, to reduce the variance of errors to ensure robustness, the pre-hoc reviews, where the test or the assessment is aligned to the table of specification and according to the difficulty indices and point bias rules. Same item for all increases fairness. Same assessors for all decreases bias or reduce the variance in error. Objectivity, somebody makes the key, but others confirm it. In order to ensure that the students have reached the level of competency you like to desire, you should have multiple items, multiple assessors, multiple exams, in multiple exams, to make sure that all is assessed in different ways. And for standard setting, I think many of us have moved to a process of standard setting. I'm not using arbitrary, but in case anybody is, it's high time we move to absolute methods, and modified Angoff is one of the methods. And all of this is done to differentiate between students who are weaker from those who are able, from those who have advanced ability. We actually did remote standard setting. It can be synchronous, where the team uses a video conference software, which has a screen sharing facility like this. There's one IT expert, one standard setting administrator. The files with the questions can be shared with the group. There's 6 to 8 content experts and the education standard setting expert conducts the exercise. The votes are according to the raised hand option. Asynchronous can be conducted as well, where the content expert ratings are sought by emails or through different item banking softwares. Both of them can be done. Both of them confidentiality is maintained. Everything is done hunky-dory. The only thing is you need to develop the faculty before you do the exercise. They should download the software, the SOPs, write down all the processes that you want for the standard setting and send it to all the team members. Ask them to familiarize themselves with the software and the process. Conduct a dress rehearsal before the standard setting exercise or use the first 15 minutes of the synchronous meeting. Because without this, errors are made. Just like any pre-exam meeting. And there are lots and lots of ways of conducting remote online assessment, both formative and summative. The 20 odd there on the web. Most often used ones are the Socrative, Google Mentors, and Mentimeter. Poll Everywhere is good. Kahoot is game-based and lots of fun. And most of them have real-time grading. They even have templates, and they get the grades immediately. And the scores go into place. You don't have to do a lot of work. Everything is made easy. There are issues in ensuring the reliability of online assessments that we want to make sure it was the students who answered, right? So when we had 2 video cams per student. Even then, some of us weren't sure what was happening. But the institutions may engage online proctors, but they're very expensive. I think it's a good time to move towards open book examinations, even for the junior classes, where you move from recall to application of what they have learned. And the examinations can open and close at a predetermined time. If a student has to consult a book more than 30%, 20%, you can look at it by the teacher may take the exam and see how much time is left for conducting, how much time you need for thinking for that level of student. And if they have to consult the book more than X number of times, they won't be able to complete the paper. And there are lots of other ways to do this. After the exam has been done, now we are going to look at the results. How reliable or stable were the student responses on the test? For most exams, we take the Cronbach's alpha. 0.08 may be good for house exams, or even lower than that. But for high stakes, pass and fail, you need a Cronbach's alpha of 0.95 or even more. Nunnally says 0.95. Kruger-Richardson is made for dichotomous assessments of, we won't go into that. Then we need to see how tough or easy was the exam paper, the difficulty index, and this will give you the mean score, which will also tell you this. Does the exam or the test or the assessment differentiate between high and low performers? Point by serials, the correlation of each question with the overall student performance. You should also calculate the mean scores, the standard deviation, reliability coefficient, and do the item analysis, and of course, the standard error of measurement. These are the areas that will make the exam robust. Not just the difficulty index high, but appropriate. So results obtained on an assessment tool should be defensible. They should be valid. They should test what should be measured and should provide you with evidence to support or refute whatever you're trying to use that test for. They should be reliable. They should be able to differentiate between those who are weaker from those who are stronger, or vice versa, in their ability or the knowledge or the communication skills or whatever technical skills are needed for schools. They should be accurate. They should be standardized. They should be objective. And of course, they must be acceptable and feasible and have face credibility. And because of accuracy, standardization, objectivity increases reproducibility or repeatability. So you can rely on them that they are repeatable, reproducible, and will again and again differentiate between those who are less able from those who are more able in the class. The quality assurance continues. The assessors need to be blinded and results cross-checked. The post hoc reviews after compilation of results, you have to confirm the key, you have to retain or delete flagged items according to the psychometrics of that of the exam and the item. Then the results have to be recompiled, computer does it, and then represented to the competent authority. So they have to, the results have to be approved by an independent body who did not, preferably, who did not teach the course, but did not teach the content. And it must provide feedback regarding the student performance to the students, to the faculty, to the curriculum, to the institutions, completing the feedback loop. We must also evaluate the examiners, the examinations, and the whole of the assessment program periodically, so that we're not left with stagnant assessment programs. I give you an example of making the cut in the pandemic. At the Aga Khan University exam board, here's a picture where they did the post hoc online. All the quality assurance measures for increasing the reliability or robustness of assessment can be performed remotely or online. Silver lining. So there is a silver lining to the pandemic, I hate to say that. But we can do online blueprinting, which having the online blueprinting on Zoom or other software platforms increases teacher representation across the country. It isn't that they cannot come because of X, Y, Z. They can all take time out to do it. There's electronic record keeping, easy to manage and save. E-signatures can be taken for record of endorsement. There's flexibility of schedule. You can send the things beforehand. And so people have looked at it, and the scheduling of the meetings can be more flexible according to people. It doesn't have to be within a certain days because they're already here. It can be over days. And you can save lots and lots of dollars otherwise spent on travel and board. The QA processes, there's ease of assessor training. They need to get familiarized with using the software and the computer. But that's the way to go. If we're going to teach our students to use a computer and softwares, we must know a bit about it ourselves. The standard setting, pre-hoc, post-hoc, all of them can be done beautifully virtually. And it is also easy to maintain the longitudinal profile of students and provide feedback loops at the touch of a button. Having said that, in summary, so when we find the diamonds, these are the evidences to support validity of our decisions, of the interpretation of the scores that we use for certain purposes. The first thing in taking the rough diamond and making it into a brilliant is planning. where the person plans how to cut it, in what form, to get the best out of the rough diamond. And that is the assessment of outcomes. We plan the assessment program, we pilot it for formative and summative assessments. Then cleaving and sewing. We break the assessment into the tools for the outcomes for each year, the examination table of specifications for each exam, for each quarter, each subject. And then routing and polishing, we develop and refine the assessment tools. We develop faculty for the assessment tools. We develop the question bank for the assessment tools. And these are through the QA systems for reliable exams, for making sure the error variance is the least possible. We can never do away with it, but we can try all methods to minimize it. And that is what brings the brilliant cut. The final inspection, which they also do, is our psychometrics, the item analysis, the difficulty index, the point by serial, the reliability of the exam, the internal structure, convex alpha, the mean scores, the standard error of measurement, how erroneous was it, keeping SEM as small as possible. All of this will then bring us to the grading, which is also done for the diamonds, and our feedback loops, which must go back to the student, back to the curriculum, back to the teachers, back to the assessors, and the leaders. With this, I thank you, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Professor Zuberi, very, very much. It was a wonderful presentation, and I think we can call it assessment in a nutshell. It's like we had everything that we need to know in assessment within 40 minutes. Very nice. I'm sure it will be very beneficial for the audience. And Navid, I think it's your turn. You are most welcome to, people that want to ask questions are welcome to, I don't know if you can open your mic and ask questions, or you prefer to write them in the chat box. I think there are a couple of, oh, that's a lot of noise. So perhaps you want to put them in the chat box, and Navid will handle it from there on, okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rukhsana Zuberi, for a wonderful talk. I'm sure it has been a very learningful experience for all of us belonging to assessment organizations and institutions. And thank you, Dr. Anand, for handing over the session for the question and answers. I will be moderating the question and answer sessions today. Please feel free to write down your questions in the chat box, and I will try and take as many questions as I can and transfer all these questions to Professor Zuberi for her expert advice and suggestions. The first question we have, Dr. Zuberi, are from Rebecca from International Baccalaureate Program. And the question says, do you have any evidence to help decide on the number of questions that is realistic when students are using a reference aid? And does this differ by type of open book exam or a reference aid used? Over to you, Dr. Zuberi.
Yes, we actually do use MCQs and short answers. So for our MCQs, we have a number. Usually we have 100 questions, and we use them within a time frame. You can use fewer, but you cannot, but for the short answer questions, you can use up to about 40. And that will give you a reliable estimate of the internal structure of your exam. So less than that can be used, but then the reliability decreases. So if you want to go to 30, you'll have to do it for in-house exams. But if you want the people to graduate from one class to the other, it's better to have 40 short answer, about 100. Less than 40 gives rise to problems. If it's high stakes examination, then the higher number will have to be used. Even for open book, there's no real difference between open book and closed book, because the number of questions is what will determine the reliability. So that's the convex alpha. Does that answer the question? What's the next one? Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Zuberi. I will move on because there is a flood of questions here. The next question is from Stuart Shaw from UK. And the question is, how is validity, reliability, and fairness reported to end user stakeholders in your context?
Well, actually, both Dr. Naveed Yusuf and I are responsible for the question bank. And we ensure that the validity and the evidences of validity are there. And we report it to the Examinations and Promotions Committee. I'm no longer there. Naveed takes the exams there. And they require the evidences for validity. They require that there should be table of specification, what were the processes followed, what is the reliability of each assessment, and how you can improve it. And if the results are not reliable, they have to go back to be reviewed. What are the areas that need to, increasing of reliability of item deleted, etc., etc. So those are exactly how we reported to the Examinations and Promotions Committee, because the chair of the Examinations and Promotions Committee is a clinician, but has also done a master's in health professions education and understands the background. A number of the people in our institution have actually got second diplomas and qualification in assessment or in medical education, because medical education, or education, I should say, forget the medical part, education, understanding the psychometrics of education or assessment is very, very important, and it is a separate area which has to be understood along with the content of what we want to assess. So we actually relate it according to the table of specifications, along with all of the evidences I talked about. We report similarly.
Thank you, Dr. Zuberi, for the response. The next question is from Dennis Opos from Ofcol, England. And then there is a comment first. Thanks for a wonderful talk. You said there was a silver lining to the pandemic. Which of those aspects do you think you will carry forward to the post-pandemic AKU exam world?
Now that it will be dependent, but I think the exam board must take into consideration the increased teacher representation with Zoom. This is across the country. So it's not that somebody cannot come, a woman has small children, it will increase the representation across the country. Number two, also for the pre-hoc, post-hoc, you can pick up people from different areas across the nation, because the exam board actually looks after the whole of the country examinations. And then it becomes very easy for some people, it's easier to come over to Karachi, and for others, it's more difficult. It will provide fairness and equal opportunities for everyone. I would love to see exam board continue with that. They already have the e-marking, which is done even previously. So this is something they have to carry on. And I would strongly suggest they do it, because it increases the representation and provides equal opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Zuberi. The next question is from the International Baccalaureate again. And as you had mentioned, the number of questions to be used if you're using multiple choice questions and short answers. The question is, what if we use some other question types other than MCQs and short answers?
It depends. You see, the thing is that you will need to have the first thing you do is validity. The first validity evidence is content sampling. If your content sample is too small, then the validity evidence for examining all the important aspects goes out of the door. The moment, you see, validity is the altar at which reliability is the high priestess. If validity is not there, then the assessment, invalid assessment is invalid. Sample across all the important domains. The first thing is content sampling, which is your table specification, should sample across all important essential items, areas.
If I could respond to that myself, if that's allowed. So I was wondering, the IB actually recently commissioned quite an extensive and agile literature search on open book exams, and it is disappointing the amount of research and evidence that comes out of that. So I'm really, really interested to know what your experiences are. But indeed, one of the things that came out of the literature is when you do this and you introduce this reference aid, which very often is not a book, but something else, then they need time to read it and to look it up. So you can't ask as many questions. And yes, the numbers 30 and 40, of course, are used by the IB as well. However, what if you leverage what open book exams could be for, which is not assessing what they know, but how they can actually use it and whether they do critical thinking? That adds to that, because not only do they need to look up stuff in their reference aid, but they also then need to think about how to use it. So you reduce the number of questions that you can ask. And the question is, do you really then accept that you'll have a lower discriminative value of the assessment, but you're assessing different things? So you're assessing the problem solving skills and not whether they can do this for all the content that's in your course. So I'm assuming that it's not just one exam you're taking, but you could spread the content over different assessments, and then you have one that is actually looking at, okay, if I can use this reference aid, what can I then measure that they can actually do? And do you have any information on that that would help us decide, yes, actually, if you do that as one of a suite of assessments, then maybe 10 difficult questions is enough instead of having 40 multiple choice questions, which might not be terribly difficult.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We will request Dr. Zuberi to respond.
I have, there's an article, very good article by George Bordage on key feature questions. None of them are straightforward. All of them are critical thinking, problem solving, and they also came to the golden number of 40. Anything less than 30 doesn't work. And actually it takes all that time, it takes about 3 hours to do it. And all of them are problem solving, critical thinking. They're related to medical examinations, but the same thing can hold. So when I say 30 to 40, there's something golden behind that. And that is the evidence. You can go look it up. It's called Key Feature Questions. And it's published by George Bordage. And that is, you see, if you hold examinations, you can hold multiple examinations. But for the one that you're going to base your pass and fail or progress to the next class, it needs to have that content sampling. You see, we want to know if they can think about critically and solve problems about all the essential areas. And that's your table of specifications or your exam blueprint. Within the exam blueprint, you have to then make ones that are for application of that knowledge rather than recall. I don't like recall either, so I'm totally with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If somebody could put the reference in the chat, because I didn't really hear it very well, that would be really great that I can look it up. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. The next question for you, Professor Zuberi, is, you mentioned that there should be 5 to 10 times the total number of questions available in the item bank. Do you mean all new items or mix of new and old items? And if mixed, how many used items can we include in a test instrument?
I mean all of them, new and old. in any instrument, what we do, and this is according to Swanson and Case, who are the authorities on setting exams as well. They are the authorities, we just follow. We actually use new questions throughout the year. So at the end of the year exam, we don't use any new questions, and none of them are C1 or recall questions. All of them are application based, and all of them have been used either for this year, preferably not for this class, but from previous classes. So when we have an item bank, we actually put in about 10 to 12 questions in the monthly exams or whatever, in which we add the new items. And that is what's been suggested, that you add the new items. Don't let the students know, but they're unscored items. You want to see how they behave. If they have negative discrimination, you delete them or redo them and use them again put in as a pilots. So 15 to 20% of the questions are the ones that are absolutely new, never been used before, but they will not count for this exam. You want to test them out. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so in your exam bank, you can have new and old both. But we always review the questions before we bank them. We have a multidisciplinary review with an educational expert, and we walk them through and say, is this question valid for this level of students? And is this correct? And is the key correct? And we go over each one of them as a pre-banking exercise before we bank any questions. So even the banked question have been reviewed, but we still call them new. And they will then be piloted. They'll be part of a whole. If they're having, say, 50 odd questions, we'll add 10 more. The exam will be extended. Students don't know which ones are the new, which ones are old. Those are not counted in the scores, but how they behave is how you will, if they behave well, with good discrimination and medium difficulty, you bank them. If they're very difficult, then you tag them that not more than 10% should be used, etc., etc. But they should be piloted before they're used for making assessment judgments.
Thank you, Dr. Zuberi. I believe the next question has already been answered. However, I will read out the question and will let you decide if you want to further elaborate. It says, if you can share a strategy to pilot test items.
Yeah, that's what we just extend the time for a little while for the exams. And then we put in the 10% of new questions, 10 to 20% new questions, which are scored but not counted in the scores. And the good ones that behave well, meaning they have good positive point by serials and a medium difficulty index we put in, or a low difficulty index with high point by serial. We also put separately as markers, okay, that not more than 10% of these should be used, otherwise the exam becomes too difficult. If you have a standard setting process, then it doesn't matter how easy or difficult the exam is, because then you can use any question, and the standard set for each of the items, you can put you can just average out all of those, and that will become the overall passing score for that exam or that assessment. That is the beauty. Then you don't have to worry about making it too easy, too difficult. If you have the standard set, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zuberi. And again, I think the next question is very much related to what you have just said. However, I will read out the question for you. When test or exam items are piloted and stored in the item bank, the quantitative information, that is item attributes and item indices, are banked. How is all this information translated into the quality or standard of the entire examination? Dr. Zuberi.
Yeah, in the old time arbitrary, when the set standard was 55%, 60%, whatever, then we used to make sure the difficulty index was around the same of the whole exam. But now with the standard setting, it doesn't matter. We can ask any of our any of the questions according to the table of blueprints, the table of specification, and put in all those questions, because if you have a standard set, then there will be differential pass cutoff score for pass for each item. And then you just total them and average the standard set, and that's the cutoff for the whole exam. If you happen to just set a difficult exam, then automatically the standard set for the cutoff for the pass mark will be lower. If you just happen to set up a very easy exam, automatically the cutoff for the pass score will be higher. But that's because we did a good standard setting exercise. That's why it's very important. That the easiness and difficulty of different exams is not a barrier to students passing or failing that exam. As it may be if you only have arbitrary cutoffs of 55% or 60% or whatever, and then suddenly set an easy exam and everybody passes. And then next year, it's a very good cohort, but you happen just to set up a difficult exam. And then so many people fail who didn't really deserve to fail. So standard setting is the way to go.
The next question is from Isabel. Are there valid ways of assessing clinical skills through other means than requiring them to be demonstrated in practice with real patients, which may have been difficult during COVID? How do you assess the validity of such assessments?
It depends on how real life you make the simulations. We have a simulation center, and so over there we actually have simulators which show it, and with the simulators we also have a bank of simulated patients. So we put the simulated patient at the head end, everybody wearing a mask and far away. And then they actually respond as patients, while on the simulator, we practice a clinical skill. We have Adams for clinical skills. We have Adams, and we have Harvey. We have Harvey. We have Lucy for OBGYN skills. We have a whole large simulation lab and it's separated out for nursing, undergraduate, postgraduate, medical, undergraduate, postgraduate, and for midwifery and allied health, as well as dentistry. We have a whole phantom head lab as well. So the phantom head lab worked very well as well. Does that answer your question?
I believe it must have responded.
The briefing, the conduct, and the debriefing takes place as if it was a real life scenario.
We are moving towards the end of the question and answer session. A couple of very interesting questions have come up, and I would like these questions to be posed and presented, Dr. Zuberi. The next one is from Geetanjali Lal, and it says, is the use of item bank only suitable for online assessments or also for assessments where we have hard copies and the examination scripts, hard copies, or even soft copies of exam items remain with the schools and students for revision purpose?
It's only in the pandemic that we used online examinations. We used to use hard copies from our exam bag, from the exam cell up till now. So it can be used for both. It's just that it so much becomes easier with the tablet and the computers, and and we made laptops available to all students to be able to answer questions. Before that, it was paper and pencil exams. Well, not pencil, but you know what I mean. So these can be used for any type of exam. It's important to have an item bank. We have a separate item bank because somebody asked a clinical skills question. We have a separate item bank for written examinations, for short answer questions, for MCQs, and others. We've got integrated SAQs, we've got integrated MCQs, all kind of stuff going on. And we've got a separate item bank for OSCEs. We've got a separate item bank for nursing OSCEs, undergraduate OSCEs, postgraduate OSCEs. So there's a whole lot that's happening over here. You can, if you have a good item bank and you develop your faculty as well as the people who work in that exam bank, who are the staff who's responsible for it, and you make sure that they qualify. For example, we made sure Dr. Naveed got his PhD in psychometrics because it was good. And we had other people do PhD and encourage them to do it in psychometrics amongst the faculty. And we made sure that our exam cell staff, they also developed and got training in IT. We've got one person purely from information technology who it was found that it would be easier for them to learn examination banking rather than a person from the exam bank learn that much of IT. So we have a mixture of people. So I hope that answers your question. But everything can be worked out if you have a good exam bank where all it needs is some imagination.
The second last question, I would say, Dr. Zuberi, for today is from John Bosco, and it asks, don't you think the shift to open book exams will compromise the standard of graduates we produce?
It depends on the open book exam. My son went to Harvard Business School. He only had open book exams. I remember I was there once when he had an exam. He told me to go away. Mom, go away. I said, okay. So the exam came on. He could take it anytime during a week. The exam came on, and if he did not push the submit button in 4 hours time, it was a 4-hour exam, then it will all be null and void. And so there are ways to conduct the exam, and it had questions which had never been asked before. And the people, I gave examples of things that were not present in the book. So when you put in application-based questions, please make sure the examples are not from the book or not exactly the same as those present in the books that you use to teach them. So I know this is at a higher level, all right, that's Harvard Business School, but believe me, you can do it for little children as well. All you have to do is just translate what you've taught them, what they've learned, into questions that they have to apply what they learn rather than just regurgitate them.
The last question for today is from a very good friend of mine, Dr. Zuberi. And Stuart Shaw from UK asks, ultimately, validity is a judgment call as Messick's integrated evaluative judgment. Who makes that final judgment, and what determining criteria guide the judgment?
The judgment is made ultimately by the examination, in our case, by the Examinations and Promotions Committee. It is our responsibility, Naveed's and mine, to make sure that all the five pillars of the validity are there and uncompromised in the assessments. We make sure there's content sampling. We make sure there's the internal the consistency is good. We make sure that the QA processes are in place. We make sure that there's divergent and criterion and convergent and divergent validity. We do assessment. For example, I did an assessment, and the last one, of course, for consequential validation. We just actually, we play around sometimes. And I did a assessment once where I looked at the anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry scores and drew a regression analysis. And there were the 3 regression lines were going, nearly parallel to each other. And then I put in all the anatomy and the physiology and biochemistry scores. and put them against another exam we hold, which is Pakistan Studies, which talks about Pakistan, its heritage and its growth. And we saw the regression lines going like this, and that was divergent validity. So it is our business to make sure that these 5 pillars are upheld. We make sure that the exams are fewer summative and many more formative. We make sure that these 5 pillars are there, and this is what we convey to the Examinations and Promotions Committee that asks for all the validity evidence. Yes, it's a judgment call based on the strength of the evidence you produce for validity. Yes.
Thank you. I would first like to thank the attendees for such engaging questions that made us learn more. And thank you so much, Dr. Rukhsana Zuberi, for such elaborate responses on these questions. I will now hand over the session to the chair, Dr. Anat. Dr. Anat, over to you for your final comments and for further announcements. Your mic is muted.
Yes, we forget about it. So thank you, Navid, for the moderation. Thank you again, Professor Zuberi, for a wonderful presentation. As I said before, we have assessment in a nutshell, and I do hope to see you in our next conferences. I'm sure you'll be able to contribute to the sessions quite a lot. So just to put things in order, I think it's 4:15 my time. Everybody has another time, but with 15 minutes after. So if I'm correct, we're going to reconvene in 15 minutes. We start our next session, and take your time, coffee, drinks, whatever, and stay, perhaps stay just on the Zoom. Don't get disengaged so that you won't lose us. And I'll see you soon again.
Yes. So may I say thank you, Dr. Anat bin Simon, for inviting me, to you and all the organizers. Again, I will wish you a very fruitful and conclusive and great conference. This is a wonderful initiative. I am so pleased and honored to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.